Hello everybody, welcome back to another watercolor tutorial. We are going to be painting this very mystical painting today. I saw a photo by artbysablrae. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but this was just, all of her artwork is so moving and so inspiring, and I'll get to that in a second. I just want to go over the first steps here. You're taking a mop brush and just covering your entire piece of paper with a layer of water. I just am using a tiny bit of black and green pigment on mine so that I can see where I'm covering my water. So I'm making sure that there aren't any gaps or pools of water, so you're welcome to do the same. But yes, her artwork is so striking. It I don't know why, but that sort of like very rainy, moody Washington forest landscape has always called my name. And anyway, this one of her more recent photos, it just came up in my suggestions. And I knew instantly that it was hers before I even clicked on it, but I wanted to replicate it and maybe put a little bit of a spin on it and make it my own, but here we go. So once you've covered your piece of paper with that layer of water, I'm actually gonna just go over it one more time just to make sure that it's completely covered and there's no pooling. And cotton paper works best for paintings like this because the paper doesn't dry as quickly, which allows you to apply all the details that you want to apply. So here I am taking some green mixed with black, and that black is very important because it creates, in my opinion, that really moody effect. And we're gonna just be creating some background faded trees here. So these are just going to spread outwards like this. So I just kind of drew a stick or a line, and I'm painting out horizontal lines at a slope, at an angle, sloping downwards. And I'm just going to do this a few times, like, and they don't all have to be pine trees. Like, you can kind of dab your brush strokes as well, because this layer is very light, first of all. And when it dries, it's going to be even lighter, so you don't have to worry too much about the detail work here. And I am just painting on a darker base here because this is going to be really, really dark in the end, so it's going to create this really nice effect. So yeah, you want to be very loose with your brush strokes in this layer because we're using very faded colors. It's going to dry even more faded. Jeez, English, Julia. So don't worry too much about wasting a lot of time on this layer. We just want to get some details down there in the background, so that it's not completely bare. And I'm just building up this base because it's eventually going to be very, very dark. And if I apply some darker layers now in these layers, then it's going to be much easier to build that darkness up. Okay, so I'm satisfied with this, I think. I always say that and then I change my mind. Maybe just a couple darker features. So it's still the same layer and my background is still wet, but I'm grabbing a tiny bit more pigment here and creating some darker trees that are also going to, in the same way, fade into the background. But at least this saves me a layer because I don't have to wait for it to dry and then apply more, like another layer of water. Like, we're gonna be doing that anyway, but at least this saves me one layer of doing that. And what I love about these types of moody paintings is they end up kind of doing their own thing a lot of the time because we're using the natural effect of water, especially on cotton paper. And oftentimes it doesn't end up looking anything like our reference. So it's completely our own. And sometimes, not sometimes, every single time I paint one of these and I'm looking at a painting, like some points I'm just inspired to create trees where there aren't trees in the original painting, or I take it in a completely different direction. And you're totally welcome to do that too as you're watching me put on these layers. You can just kind of do whatever you're feeling like, whatever you're called to do. It's completely up to you. And the point of this, or not the point, but the idea is we want to make our brush strokes extremely loose. So I'm going to just zoom in here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just dabbing the very end of my size 14 Grumbacher brush. And because my background is still a little bit wet, that should spread out and sort of soak into the background there. It's a little bit too bubbly for me, so I'm going in with a liner brush and just adding some pointed details to the ends. Not that it's going to make that much of a difference because it's going to dry. It's going to fade in before it dries, but that's just what I'm feeling like doing right now. All the paintbrushes and products and whatnot that I use are linked in the description as always. If you use my link to purchase those paintbrushes, or honestly any product, if you navigate away from my link, it'll give me commission. It's no extra cost to you, but it does help me continue this channel if you use my links before you make any Amazon purchase, which is kind of awesome. I'm going to zoom back out. Okay, so I can already see, oh my gosh, this tree just faded into a blob. I am not happy with that. Yikes. Okay, we're gonna go over that later, but let's just let this dry and we'll continue on with the next layer. Okay, so this is mostly dry. I can see some wet parts here, but I am impatient. I am just applying very loosely another layer of water. Whoops. And here we're gonna start applying much darker features. So I'm just starting with the bottom and painting on just a solid black bottom and letting that spread upwards naturally. So I'm gonna start painting much more dramatic trees. So I have quite a bit of black pigment on my paintbrush, very little water. And I paint my trunk. And then I kind of have these branches that swoop down and then up again. You know what? I just realized that I haven't been adding very much green, so I just added some green to my black. I have a lot of these 50-foot towering pine trees right in my backyard because we live in a forest, and they have these dead twigs poking out at the bottom, and I'm assuming that's because the sunlight doesn't quite get to them. So as it grows taller, the bottom branches die off. Don't be scared to be very dramatic with your colors. Especially while it's still wet, it'll just fade. I'm just wetting a paintbrush here, like a different one, and using it for the top just to spread out some of this color so it's not as harsh. And I'm using another paintbrush so that I don't have to take all the pigment off of the one that I'm currently using, because that would waste a lot of pigment, I think. So you could see that this side is already starting to dry because it's not fading into the painting as much as this tree did. And I do want it to be a little bit more mystical and less defined, so I'm just going back in with that second paintbrush and just picking up some of that pigment on the tops of my branches. And I'm gonna do that a little bit on the first tree I painted as well, picking up some of that pigment so that it doesn't look so wishy-washy. Now you can start to get very creative and unique with kind of what you start painting from this point onwards. You don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. I'm just taking, like from this point onwards, I'm taking very, very pigmented black, so very little water, and I'm using that to create these intense values with my paintbrush. And so my details are a lot more intense and they spread out a lot less, and also obviously my paper has dried a little bit, so that contributes to that more intense effect. But I do still like working with the paper when it's still a little bit wet in certain locations. It then, you know, for example here, like I'll close up a little bit. It's spreading a little bit here because this part was still wet, and to me that just creates a really natural and really cool mystical effect. And you can, even when your paper has dried and you want to do that effect, you can go in with another paintbrush like so and just add a little bit of water to where you want your painting to look a little bit more washy and create that same sort of effect. So this is already where I'm starting to differ quite a bit from the reference photo. I really like sharp details on a wishy-washy misty background. Like, I like the foreground of my painting to always be very dark and intense with sharp details and features. And you can see that that's kind of a common trait amongst all of my outdoor paintings. So I love that misty, wishy-washy background, but I love those intense details as well. Whereas the reference photo that I'm looking at, it's very much so completely wishy-washy, which is beautiful. It really is. It's beautiful in its own right and regard, but I personally like a slightly different look when I'm painting, and that's okay. I do want to go back in with the original trees that I painted. And just define some of the details a little bit more, because they've seemed to completely washed out. So I added that intense dark, and then I'm going in with my other paintbrush there and just aiding in that so they don't look very unnatural. For some of them, you don't even have to paint like all the branches. You can just have some lines that are going straight up that are a little bit faded, and it creates more detail. I mean, if there's too many lines, you can just add some horizontal sticks, I guess, just coming out from them so they don't look completely random, but that's an option for you as well. So what I'm gonna do, because this area looks a little bit bare to me. So I'm going in and just adding like a pine tree that's kind of growing up top here. But what I'm going to do, because I don't want to extend it all the way down, I just want it to look misty. I'm going to take that paintbrush that I was using earlier and just fade it out. I'm going to add a non-pine tree to my painting just to vary it up because it's looking very piney, which is never a bad thing, certainly, but why not, right? Why not add something else? I'm also going to have one coming from this end. See, adding these regular trees, I suppose, rather than pine trees and just conifers, it adds a different dimension to your painting because you're adding lines that are not identical to all the other ones. So conifers all sort of look very similar, you know, kind of triangular shaped, if you will, whereas regular trees, there's a lot more thin individual branches, and I wanted to add that dimension to this painting, especially in the foreground, because if it's super dark, it's really it really is brought to the forefront and catches the eye of the viewer. Anyway, you can go wild. You can keep doing that indefinitely, but I think at some point it starts to become a little cluttered. I think I already went a little overboard in the foreground here, but I think I am generally happy with how that turned out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Also hit like on this video because it helps me grow, and thanks for watching, guys.